In this video, I want to announce I've completed a pretty big project, actually mostly completed it, and it's a comprehensive list of best movies of the 1980s. I covered the full decade. I got most things, I think 97%, 100% of most things, including the BFI poll, the Sight and Sound poll, the Rolling Stone list, the Oscars, the Cannes Film Festival, and all kinds of other things. So go check that list out on letterboxd.com. And the link to that will be below in the description. I sort of went all in on the 80s for a few reasons. One, I kind of already had watched a number of these movies. But second, I wanted to improve my understanding of a particular time period. And this would have been my youth, basically, from the age of 0 to 10. And so to know more about that, it was really, really helpful for me. Besides that, to get more recommendations to tell you, I think this list is a really valuable thing to do, a big project like this. It is like a comprehensive exam list in a doctoral degree. And I did one of those. People ask me, what are you a doctor of? I say a doctor of literature. But I really learned how to learn through doing a doctoral study and a dissertation. One of the projects is a comprehensive exam where I had to read about 100, I think it was 150 books over a year's period. A lot of primary text in a particular period of time. Mine was American literature, and then a number of secondary sources or critical sources on those. And to do that project over the year, to really focus and hone in on one period of time, and how it shaped and developed and the different points of view that developed and its intersection with history and psychology and economics and every other discipline. Really super invaluable to me. So over the years, I've done this a couple times. I did it with science fiction where I did a really deep dive. Personally, I didn't do it as a degree into that. And then I've done it with movies over the past, I'd say, 15 years or so. In this particular case, I did it with 1980s movies. And a decade is an arbitrary, standard. It's 1980 to 1989. Well, why didn't I do 1975 to 1984? Who cares? But the 80s, well, it's just, everybody knows to talk about decades. But I found it to be really interesting because now I know a whole lot about this time period. And one thing you learn when you do this sort of comprehensive study is the zeitgeist, how the spirits of the age, as it were, what people believed in so much that they didn't even really think about it. They just assumed these things were true. And then to show those off in their dreams or visions, their artistic dreams, which is what movies are. And you can kind of see where a group of people in a particular time are at by looking at their artworks. One thing I learned, nostalgia is all over the place in this time period. Maybe it always is, but they love the 19-teens. Loved it. I mean, the first part of the 1980s, so many big, huge movies, a lot of money spent on movies set in the 19-teens. But then I think the baby boomers get more and more power and say in movies, and they're making nostalgic movies in the 1950s, movies about their childhood. And you get so many of these. It's just unbelievably terrible and fun at the same time. I think more and more it gets terrible because the more of these you see, you go, oh, another one of these 1950s childhood movies. And then there's a lot of discussion about divorce, marriage and divorce and separation, and then children. And children, who are they? What are they going to grow up to be? From the films that focus on children, from John Hughes, The Lost Boys, all kinds of teenage movies where teenagers would become more and more of an audience for movies, to then movies like Terms of Endearment, which Kramer versus Kramer is 1979, but settles on divorce. A great movie from New Zealand, Smash Palace. Go watch this one, where it's about a couple separating and then what happens to the children. Steven Spielberg he's here in this decade, all over the place, one of his greatest decades, by popular claim. And E.T., Raiders of the Lost Ark, but Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, Empire of the Sun, maybe Color Purple. He's really talking about children and how they're dealing with their fathers, their parents, how they grow up. He's going to keep doing this, of course, but this is one of his main ideas. And he's with that mainstream zeitgeist. He's not differing from any of that during this time period. A couple other things I learned, that the Oscars are no good. They're just awful. In fact, most of the time, you cannot trust them at all. The Best Picture nominees, some of them are forgotten, some of them are terrible. Even the winners at times are terrible, including one of the worst ones ever, in my opinion. 1989, Driving Miss Daisy. I'll get to that in another video, but that, to me, was an abomination. And so I've learned to trust the Cannes Film Festival a bit more. The winners of the Palme d'Or, sorry for my pronunciation, that is a better they took more risk, let's say, and some of those risks weren't good. But if you go back and look at lists and you go, well, should I watch all the Oscar winners? I would say no. Watch the Palme d'Or winners. They're at least interesting in some way, shape, or form, or different than what you're used to watching. Another big thing I learned is that film preservation has to happen right now. There's so many movies from the 80s that are basically lost to time, and they're not on streaming services. They are surviving in 720p or worse on DVDs that you can only get from libraries. I can't even buy some of these. I can't rent them or stream them. And so to not have films made 30 to 40 years ago that were acclaimed in their day that are not available is a big problem now. I think it's probably happening for movies like in the 90s maybe, but the 80s you can't find some of these Oscar nominees for Best Picture. And it was just bizarre. There's even a couple Cannes Film Festival winners like The Road, which is a movie from Turkey. You can't find it. You can find it on YouTube, but only in Turkish, and then it does this garbled translation to English, and it wasn't accessible to me, so that's when I couldn't really watch. I don't know how to get hold of, and I hope somebody comes along with its Kino or Criterion to somebody and preserves. I got a whole list, so you can contact me. Some of these films that are basically lost, so what I end up doing is buying a lot of physical media for myself, because I feel like some of these films are disappearing. In fact, one of the films I meant to watch for this, and I didn't get to, is The Cook, the Wife, the Thief, and His Lover by Peter Greenaway, who I learned to really appreciate, who was definitely very weird for this decade. But that movie, I decided it was a 1989 movie. It's a big, complicated thing. It could be a 1990 movie. But then when I went to watch it, because I saw it was on streaming, it wasn't there. It had disappeared, and I can't get a hold of it. I have to go buy the Blu-ray from England. So anyway, I'm waiting on that one to come. And there's a few like that that aren't on my list, but for the most part, I did watch as many 1980s movies as I could, and some of them are disappearing or have disappeared. I'm going to, over the next few months, release videos on Oscar picks for all the years and which Oscars should go to which movies in the 1980s. I think those are fun videos. And I'm going to take a short break, but eventually I'm going to get to the 1990s and go through all of them. I've watched a great number of those movies, but to go through some of the movies I haven't, and then to try to evaluate it year by year and then by decade, it's a Herculean task. The 80s, it was like climbing a mountain in the Rocky Mountains. It's 12,000 feet. Go through the 1990s. Now I'm in the Andes Mountains. It's even higher mountain range. So it's going to be a lot more movies to watch. But that's my project. I'm going to try my best to get through that within the next year. So what projects are you going to take up personally for yourself? Which ones are of interest to you? I myself go through directors lists, and now I go through a whole decade. Let's see what you can try. So let us know what you're interested in for yourself, or maybe for me and for this channel, what this channel should be up to. Thanks very much for viewing. See you later. Please subscribe. Have a great day.